Welcome to the Bourbon Van. I'm Phil.
I'm Julie. Let's talk underrated bourbons.
Well, we had another article shared with us, and this one is by vinepair.com. We asked 12 bartenders, what's the most underrated bourbon? And apparently this is updated for 2023. We're going to go through this list, talk a little bit about the bottles that they've got on there, and say whether or not we agree, and maybe offer an alternative or two. And then at the end of this thing, we asked our Patreons what they think the most underrated bourbons are. And, we think that's a great list, and we're going to share that with you as well.
Let's get started. First on the list, and I have to say, I agree with them. It's Wild Turkey 101 Bourbon.
Yeah, absolutely. And they even mentioned the 101 Rye as well, depending on your palate. And we, like you said, definitely agree on this one. It is affordable, it is flavorful, it's 101 proof, and Wild Turkey, you could put a lot of their products on this list, I think. It's a severely underrated brand amongst people who don't know bourbon very well. But out there in the bourbon community, you will find a lot of love for Wild Turkey products, and we will talk more Wild Turkey stuff as this video goes on. But yeah, Wild Turkey 101 Bourbon or Rye, which is actually the one that I prefer, that's a great way to kick off this list.
Next up is Four Roses Single Barrel Bourbon, and I have no problem with this one too.
Yeah, I can't argue with this one at all. It's 100 proof and sells locally here for around $50 a bottle. And if you're at a bar and you haven't tried it before, you definitely need to give it a go. If you've never been to Four Roses Distillery,
beautiful.
Yeah, highly recommend that. The Spanish Mission style. It's awesome. Four Roses is another brand who we like a lot of what they have to offer. And yeah, no complaints here. That's another good one.
Michter's Small Batch Bourbon is next on the list, and I think it's an interesting pick.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that Michter's distillery as a whole maybe is underrated, but it's a tricky one, right? Because it's all a little bit pricey compared to a lot of what else you're going to find on this list. That bourbon in our neck of the woods sells for about $50. It's pretty low proof. It is unique, but again, with this one, I tend to go for the rye when we're talking Michter's. So I don't know if I agree with this one entirely. It is a unique flavor profile. It is worth a try if you've never had Michter's before, but they actually mention this as a cocktail whiskey, which I could see it, I guess, but that's pretty pricey.
It's a pretty pricey mixer. Next up, Jefferson's Reserve Bourbon.
I don't know about this one. I don't know that I would call it underrated. This is, I think, one of the more well-known bottles, specifically because people gift it all the time. It kind of hits that price point that people like to give whiskeys in, and you see it on the shelf all over the place. You see it on people's shelves all over the place. I like that bourbon, but price-wise, I would say that there's probably better values out there.
Yeah, that brand doesn't fly under the radar for me.
To call it underrated, I don't think I can agree with this one. I think I blatantly disagree with this one, in fact.
Next up, another interesting pick, Barrel Bourbon.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. This was never a brand that I was a big fan of. I think that what they've been producing lately, especially in the last 6 months, is much, much better than what they were producing previously. And they seemed to have a very large following previously. So I think that if you are a bourbon collector or a whiskey enthusiast, you probably are pretty well versed on Barrel. I would say if you're a regular person off the street and you go into a bar and you see Barrel, you might not think anything of it.
I guess that makes that underrated because the regular person doesn't know about it, and we're telling you should know about it.
I guess that is the case, absolutely. Again, Barrel stuff is generally blended from a few different whiskeys, and it can be a little bit pricey, but there's no denying that the flavors are good. They know what they're doing when they're blending their whiskeys, and it is worth a shot. So yeah, I guess I would agree that this is underrated. It's a tough one.
I don't think this next one counts. It's Eagle Rare 10-year.
Eagle Rare 10-year. Yeah, who doesn't know about that one? Even people coming in off the street, they see that bottle, and it's hard to find. It can be pricey when you can find it. And there's no arguing, that's pretty good whiskey, sure. And they, in the last year, they added the 10-year age statement to the front of that bottle. So perhaps previously people didn't know what it was. They didn't know it was a 10-year whiskey. I don't know, but something about this one definitely doesn't sit right with me because that seems very well known and very hard to find. So calling that bottle underrated, that's a strange one.
Yeah, but if you walk by it, you should pick it up. It is delicious. Next up, they're being very specific. It's Bardstown Fusion number 8.
Yeah, the Fusion series. Yeah, I can't really speak to this one. I know it's readily available in a lot of the country. Not here, but we don't see the Bardstown stuff at all. And Bardstown, there are some affordable bottles out there, and each time we get a sample of Bardstown, people seem to like sending it to us, and we like
drinking it.
Yeah, I can honestly say I haven't been disappointed by anything that we've gotten from them. Mm-hmm. Would you call it underrated? I don't know about that.
I wonder if it's underrated because most people don't really think about it in terms of the big distilleries.
Yeah, and they may not know it exists yet. It is relatively new out there comparatively. Yeah, I guess I would be somewhere in the middle on this one. I wouldn't be all in on calling it underrated, though.
Yeah, I might think it's underrated because personally we can't get it. I do want it. Every time I have some, I like it. And so I'm a little jealous of the people that can get it.
Bottom line on Bardstown is I actually can't speak to that specific batch of Fusion, and it's probably very good. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think underrated maybe just means in this case not well known.
I think you're right.
If underrated means you don't know about it, this next one fits the bill for me. It's David Nicholson Bourbon Reserve.
I actually don't know much about this one either. I've seen it on the shelf a few times, and I've even gotten to try it because my brother loves this brand. He thinks it's fantastic. I know it's relatively affordable. It's a good-looking bottle, good-looking brand, and what I've had of it, I like, but I can't speak to it. So I actually think that we have to agree with this one, that it is underrated, because I've tasted it, I like it, I still don't have it on my shelf, even though it's really affordable. So yeah, what's wrong with me? I think that it probably is underrated. Let us know. What do you think of David Nicholson out there?
So they don't say which one this is, but it's Old Granddad.
We just love Old Granddad bourbon. Yeah, there's a 80 proofer, there is the Bonded, which is our favorite, there's OGD 114. They're all quite good. The 80 proof are a little boring, although it is good in cocktails, and it's great to share around a campfire for sure. I don't know, would you call this one underrated? It seems like people like this brand a lot.
Well, it's not underrated for the bourbon man because we always have it on our shelves, and we probably always have multiple bottles on our shelves, and we keep trying to tell you guys that it's underrated, that you should have it on your shelf, so maybe it is underrated.
I guess. The OGD 114, it gets cleared out of shelves regularly, so I don't think they're talking about that one. Maybe they're talking about the 80 proofer, although there's plenty of solid 80 proof bourbons out there. I don't know why this one specifically would get called out. I think if anything, I would go with the Bonded here. I would agree because it's affordable, it is flavorful. Again, a great bottle to share. Yeah. We do love that one, although I don't know that I would call this particular brand underrated. It's the High Rye Jim Beam product that sure hits our palates, and we talk about it all the time. Everybody seems to know about it, but I guess to the new bourbon drinker, they may not know about it. In that case, yeah, underrated probably.
I feel like we've talked about Old Granddad Bonded in like the last 5 videos.
Yeah, probably.
The remainder of this list, I believe, are all craft bourbons.
I think you're right, and I like that these are included, even though they're very territorial. These are for specific areas, and so most of these we've never even tried. You're talking New Southern Revival Jimmy Red Bourbon Whiskey, never even heard of that. Tattersall Distilling's Wheated Bottled and Bond Bourbon, never heard of that. Old 55 Sweet Corn Bourbon, which I can't speak to the sweet corn, but I will tell you we've got Old 55 in this glass right now, and we love that one. What else? Old Carter Straight Bourbon Whiskey. I guess I don't know. I've never seen a bottle of it, and what's out there is usually a couple of $100. I don't think anything priced that highly can be called underrated, personally. And then Woodinville, which is getting more and more available out there, but it's still, that's a Pacific Northwest brand that we don't see everywhere, but we do love it.
Yes.
And then ultimately, the last one on this list is Driftless Glen Single Barrel Bourbon from Wisconsin, which we've had and enjoyed. So I think the bottom line on these smaller distilleries is that craft distilling is coming along. What may have not been that great before has been aging longer and longer, and they're getting better at it. And we're finding in our road trips that whenever we walk into a new distillery, we're actually quite impressed with what we're finding out there, from bourbon to American single malt to rye, you name it. So I do like that they included so many of these craft distillers on this list, because I think so many of them deserve it. Certainly Old 55, Driftless Glen, Woodinville, these are some whiskeys that we know are quite good because we've had some in our collections that are quite good.
And some of our favorite bottles this year are from craft distilleries.
Seems like it's been that way almost every single year. So those are the bottles that they listed as underrated bourbons on vinepair.com, and we'll share the link in the description so you can check out everything that they said about all these whiskeys. So now we're going to share some of the bottles that our Patreons talked about, and these are the ones that were mentioned the most. They had actually a lot of ideas, but these are the ones that came up again and again, and we'll break them down by distillery. But before we get into this, we want to ask you, what's your most underrated bourbon? Whether it's a local craft thing, whether it's a big bourbon that people don't talk about enough, or maybe it's your daily drinker and you just want to give it a shout out. Let us know in the comments, what is your most underrated bourbon? Just pick one. Try to pick one.
So now on to the Patreon list. Let's start with Jim Beam bottles.
None other than one of our favorites, and we actually talk about this kind of a lot, Baker's 7.
Yeah.
107 proof. It can be a little pricey in some places, and it can be even a little hard to find from place to place, but we love the flavors. We love that whiskey. It surprises us every time we sip it. Every time I look at that bottle and I think, I don't know, is it still worth the price? I take a sip and I go, yeah, it's absolutely worth it. It's so good. If you like rich, decadent flavors and a terrific mouthfeel on your bourbon, Baker's 7 is fantastic.
And the other bottle that they talked about is Legent, which I don't know anything about, and I'm curious to find out more.
Yeah, I think we actually need to get a bottle of this and do a little review, because I don't know anything about this product either. All I know is that it's a collaboration of multiple things, I guess. We're going to find out what it is, and if you are a Legent fan, let us know in the comments, what are we missing? Because I am going to pursue a bottle of it. I know that they have it locally here. I just walk past it every single week when I'm at the liquor store. I do go to the liquor store quite a bit.
I feel like that fit's underrated. You walked right past it. You should get it. Next up, this could definitely be one of my desert island bottles. It's Russell's Reserve 10.
Yeah, Wild Turkey on the list. Once again, a lot of Wild Turkey bottles were thrown out there, but Russell's Reserve 10 showed up again and again. And earlier we were talking about Eagle Rare 10-year, and we've done the head-to-head in a blind tasting with Russell's Reserve 10. Russell's Reserve,
one-handedly,
it kind of clobbered it. Yeah, Eagle Rare 10, very pleasant.
Yeah.
But for flavor and for what hits our palates, it's Russell's Reserve 10 kind of by a landslide. And yeah, for that price point, for 10-year age statement, it's a 90 proof bourbon, but you're getting an awful lot to like there. So I think in some parts of this community, it is very highly rated, but in other parts, it's criminally underrated. So yeah, definitely deserves a spot on this list.
Heaven Hill has a bunch of bottle and bond bourbons, but JTS Brown is the one that was mentioned the most.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that, because I actually think of the affordable Heaven Hill bottled and bond products, and a lot of them are right in that $20 range. JTS Brown is the one that I enjoy the most. So it's, again, 100 proof, 4 years aged, and you're not expecting a lot for the money, but the flavor that comes through is quite good. So yeah, JTS Brown bonded bourbon, I think it's a fantastic one to put on this list, because everybody talks about Evan Williams White Label, and rightly so. It's a solid bourbon. But for me and my palate, it's JTS Brown, and I also love that old-timey label. It's just cool.
And lastly, from Brown Forman, it's Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve, and one of our favorites.
Yeah, our decanter over there always has Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve in it. 100 proof, $29.95. It's not the easiest bottle to find out there. Some states don't sell it at all, but around here it's $29.95, 100 proof. Tons of great oak flavor, lots of vanilla, and a fantastic profile that really hits our palates perfectly. We love to share it. We love to pour it out of the decanter and make people guess exactly what we paid for it, because that's just fun for us. But yeah, we completely agree on that one. Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve, 100 proof. And that's it. That's the list. What are the underrated bourbons that we left off this list? What are we not talking about? What are people out there just missing completely? Let us know all about it in the comments from wherever we are.
To wherever you are.
Cheers.
Cheers. Love that old 55.
That's ridiculous.